having a cured patient is not a good business model. So, like, and this is we just kind of have to see these models for what they are, which is a way to make profit.
Claire, how did you find Carnivore?
Hi, so I am a longevity scientist, and I found it essentially because it made a lot of sense to me with regard to longevity. Because a lot of the longevity field is focused on metabolic health, and then so much of that regulating metabolism and as well as regulating DNA. So that's kind of where the longevity field is, and through I can go further into my background, but throughout my whole path, I decided. So I was previously a scientist in biology. I went to university for that, as well as did a PhD in stem cells at the University of Oxford. And following that, I did some work in Alzheimer's. But after all that work, I realized that a lot of the biggest risk factor for a lot of these chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, dementia, etc., is due to aging. So I got into the aging field, and this field is actually quite young. It started in around 2020 when a couple of companies, mostly well in the US and as well as in the UK, they wanted to target instead of focusing on specific diseases like specific mutations and cancers, they are making therapies that target pathways of aging. And a lot of these pathways of aging are metabolic. So when I went into this field around 2.5 years ago, I told myself, I was like, you know what, I need to walk the walk. I need to be a good representative of that which I'm studying and be healthy myself. And previous to that, there's another plot twist. I had actually been vegan for 10 years, having seen my health very much so decline from that. Yeah, so at the time, I believe there was really good vegan marketing. Like, I was vegan from around 2010 to 2020, and I fell for really good marketing. There were also great vegan communities at my university, so University of McGill in Canada, and then at Oxford as well. It was very vegan friendly. A lot of events had good vegan options. So I did that, but over that 10 years, my health declined in the form of just having like the main thing was insomnia, and then severe like metabolic inflexibility. I was constantly hungry. I would wake up in the middle of the night hungry, and I would need like a quick sugar fix. So just addicted to sugar, and just having lower and lower energy. And near the end of that vegan journey, I was unable to absorb food. I had developed so many food intolerances, really bad irritable bowel syndrome, and I was eating as much as I could, but I couldn't absorb the nutrients, so I didn't have energy. And yeah, so that was not a great thing. And and going into the longevity field, I was like, I need to be a good representative, and I can't look like I'm a zombie. so so luckily, I listened to a lot of carnivore podcasts, like such as Sean Baker, Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Robert Kiltz, Ken Berry, etc. And it made a lot of sense to me. And especially since a lot of the longevity field is focused on metabolic pathways, I was like, well, this would be a way to optimize our metabolism, especially at the level of mitochondria. If I went a little bit more geeky. So, and interestingly, so I am working in the longevity field now, developing. So the field is focused on therapies, which I think it is kind of interesting that we are targeting pathways such as autophagy or other ways to improve, like small molecules or certain drugs, like such as I feel like people probably have heard of things such as metformin, rapamycin, to regulate like growth periods of building, building up and repair to really balance that. So these are the more general pathways that the longevity field is targeting to treat things such as dementia. So that's the thing. And then the other aspect of the longevity field that is maybe that carnivore maybe cannot necessarily do is the rejuvenation part. So a part of aging is due to the DNA, the shape of the DNA being more and more disorganized over time, such that each specific cell of specific organs lose their identity and ability to function. And what the longevity field found was that actually you can fix this. So that's where the newer therapies come in, which will take some time, but you can actually remodel DNA to rejuvenate a cell to make it younger with current use cases that are being developed, such as like hearing loss or blindness, even. We're able to,
Wow.
yeah. So these are the things, I mean, I think like I think preventative medicine through lifestyle habits is very powerful, but for those with terminal illness, targeting, yeah, this is where I would say longevity therapies come in to try to fix terminal illness. Yeah.
Wow. So just on the misshapen DNA, is that something that lifestyle factors do influence? Like, for someone who's 20 years old, like if
Yeah.
they have a healthy lifestyle, they're less likely to have the problem?
That's a great question. And again, this longevity field is almost so simple in that the misshapen DNA is also due to metabolic issues. So, pretty much, very like a lot of the longevity pathways rely on insulin, which is like a glucose uptake, and then mTOR, which is like building and break versus breaking down autophagy, and they're all related to metabolism. And metabolism then directly feeds into the rewiring of the DNA through something. I'll just put out this term and people can look into it. It's called sirtuins. These are the things that would remodel DNA, and people have like looked into a couple of different drugs such as like NAD plus. Like these are the things that people can look into to see. But the main thing is that the rewiring of, yeah, the remodeling of the DNA is actually related to metabolism, which is uh, tunable by our lifestyle decisions. Yeah.
So speaking about lifestyle decisions, um, you were a vegan for 10 years.
Yes.
I know your health was suffering, but was it a hard change for you? Like, did you have to kind of psych yourself up for going from eating basically vegetables to eating and tofu to eating meat?
Kind of, but actually, in a way, like I think before those 10 years of veganism, I grew up like I get in a Chinese household eating like food from Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is a place that, eats the most meat in per capita. So I think I was kind of, when I finally ate meat again, it was almost just going back to like my childhood roots. And I remember some of my first foods growing up, like my grandparents just fed me meat. Like I didn't eat any baby formula. So when I was growing up in China before I moved to Canada, I was actually eating quite a bit of meat. So that I'm grateful for. Yeah.
Wow. Um, so like when you moved over to eating meat and carnivore, how quickly did you start to realize, oh, I've done the right thing?
Really quickly. Uh, the sleep was the first thing that came. I had suffered from insomnia for more than 10 years. So just being able to actually sleep through the night and feel well rested. And now every single night I dream. So that's like double check that I have actually fallen into deep sleep. So that it happened quite quickly, and I didn't really have digestive issues, although I realized I couldn't really tolerate eggs, but meat I had no issues of reintroducing back. Like after a few days, it was quite nice. And it was not I didn't transition right away to eating only meat. I had like a little bit of vegetables, a little bit just
Mm.
a little bit of nuts along, like I think it was more of like a ketovore kind of transition. And then in the end I'm like, I don't really care for any non-meat thing anymore. So might as well go full carnivore.
Right. And like what is your diet like now?
Now it's mostly red meat, but sometimes chicken, mostly steaks. I think I get to eat like my favorite food every single day, essentially. Mostly different cuts of steaks like ribeye and New York strip, chuck, etc., with butter. And then I want to eat more nose to tail. Actually, even that is very traditional. Of like, I really liked eating like tongue and intestines and everything, but I'm just personally not a fantastic cook, so I need to improve in that regard.
Right. And is that like 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day?
Now, to be honest, like because of my schedule and work, it ended up being one meal a day, and I think so. Not even like yeah, not even intentionally. It kind of just happened by accident. But I do think like as a female, and the other thing that's quite critical is that when I was vegan, I lost my period for 3 years. So that was kind of worrisome for me because I'm like, well, obviously, this is an important thing in life to be able to reproduce. So I got it back on carnivore, and this is still something that I think is quite important, like for females, potentially like the hormonal health and having good like regular periods is quite important to try to figure out.
I think
Yeah,
this is one of the things you hear reported from carnivores that kind of it just tells you everything. Like this is the way we should have been eating all the time.
yeah, that is absolutely the case.
Hmm.
Though I think the deficiency thing, like just because even the way that I'm eating, I'm actually just asking ChatGPT all the time. Because even I just tell it what I eat, and it's like, well, you could be missing some iodine. It's telling me to eat some omega 3. So it's actually helping me out in trying to round out this carnivore diet for like a female of reproductive age, where I want to balance my progesterone and estrogen. Don't want estrogen dominant. So it's helping me like if I just tell it, like all my what I'm doing. And so I think it's quite important to like some of these nutrients to just pay attention to.
And like supplements wise, you're taking like some iodine and other things.
Well, yeah, because it told me to. I'm taking some iodine. I'm taking for now some magnesium glycinate, as well as otherwise just electrolytes like here and there. But otherwise I just use like plain salt because some of the salts that are not plain they have like anti-caking agents, and I don't like that. So, yep.
So how is this in your work? I mean, your work is about metabolic lifestyle. As is when you go to work, are people like, "Oh yeah, that's good," or are they kind of like, "That's a bit weird"?
It is absolutely weird because I guess one doesn't really like that's why there are not that many carnivore longevity scientists because they think of it as these individual pathways such as mTOR, AMPK, sirtuin signaling. They think of it as signaling pathways, but they don't may not necessarily see it as like all regulating metabolism and metabolic and another key part, a core part of what regulates these pathways are ketones. So this is not, I guess, as like a scientist, like really focused on trying to specific mechanisms. One might kind of overlook the practice of this. And furthermore, a lot of the longevity fields for now is plant based. Due to, I think, a big part of that could be due to the fact that plant based research gets a lot of funding. So that's what, and then potentially a misinterpretation of, because it is actually, so a part of the longevity thing is um, keeping mTOR like not super high. So mTOR means building. And when you build and you have higher insulin, greater glucose in the cells, you suppress autophagy. Autophagy is a way to get rid of the junk in the cell. So that's more of a breaking down. And that helps get rid of things such as, like in dementia, all those misfolded proteins that could cause harm over time. So I guess a misinterpretation of mTOR could be like, oh, we don't want we don't want so much building, so we're just going to caloric restrict. And the field may see plant based as a way to reduce calories. However, another huge risk factor of aging is sarcopenia, which is muscle loss. So, that obviously, if you just restrict calories, the muscle loss would come with, and that would be a risk factor. So, actually, doing keto or carnivore is a way to keep mTOR relatively low since you're not spiking insulin, but while still retaining muscle mass for healthy aging. So I think a lot of this stuff is still new, but the really exciting thing. So I also work in I think a lot of the biotechs, like a lot of the modern biotechs that started like after 2020, is using a lot of AI. And like only recently, and the thing about AI is that it's in a way it's unbiased. So it's trained on just all the information that's out there, and then it'll just tell you based on assessment of the information, kind of without bias. And recently, as I'm talking to ChatGPT, I asked what is the optimal diet for humans, and it says keto and carnivore due to its benefits for metabolism. So I think it's slowly coming around, and yeah, and I think in my case, kind of like I just really wanted like fast results. I'm like, I want it to look good being a scientist in the longevity field. And this was like a really natural and simple way for me to kind of walk the walk.
Yeah. So just to explore in your field a little bit more, like, is it, you know, the plant-based research gets more funding, that kind of thing, but does that mean it's more political? Like, can people talk to you and say, oh, you're doing carnivore, that's interesting, how is that working? And if you explain the kind of things you've just explained to me, can they go, that's really interesting? Or are they kind of shut down to that idea because of maybe a political ideology or something?
I believe, yeah, for the most part, it's the shutdown to the idea due to political ideology. Although I would say instead of kind of focusing on that, which to me feels like a losing battle, there is now ways to use like AI driven ways to like I recent just preparing for this podcast, I was just looking at what data is already out there because they're not going to fund carnivore studies as much as plant based, but people have already reported through like different tracking uh, methods or even glucose monitoring or blood tests. There's already publicly available data sets for blood work in, for example, carnivore versus plant based. And we can see, I was actually, so some of the trends we see is we see more inflammation in plant based, and then yeah, and like higher hemoglobin A1C in plant based and increased insulin. So it looks like a lot of these metabolic markers are much better in carnivore. And then the AI model is also able to predict, like based on these metabolic markers, what is the expected life expectancy. And even the AI says that carnivore has a much longer, like around 10 years increased life expectancy. So I was thinking actually to kind of put together some of these studies and include some of the papers and references of all of this data and like submit, there are like preprint servers online where you can submit papers, and that could be like a start to just kind of get the conversation going, because this is publicly available data that, you know, that I would just need to analyze.
That's super interesting. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Because when you ketovore, carnivore, there's bound to be less inflammation because your body's not, your insulin's low, and yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And people see that now. Like there is also further evidence of that with inflammatory markers like C reactive protein. They are lower and triglycerides as well are lower in carnivores compared to plant-based. So I don't want to like offend anyone. I want to try to make this as respectful as possible, but report the data. So I think there's exciting things to be done now, because if I just, I think, and it was like very recent, because I only like AI, like ChatGPT only started telling me this like in the past week or so, that the optimal diet is carnivore or animal based, ruminant, reducing plant toxins. It tells us that we were evolved to eat like this. So pretty much I was like, this sounds like what I heard Anthony Chafee say for like the past couple of years.
So I'm just interested, is it, do you have to frame the question in a certain way to chat GPT, or is it just it's now producing that information? Because like I find myself sometimes when I ask questions about health and nutrition, I end up getting into almost a fight and having to ask a question in a roundabout way to get the kind of answer that I want.
I think it could also be hard to say, because it might also know that I'm personally doing this. So it might like be, trying to. And the other thing is that because I work with kind of the company that made ChatGPT, I might have a newer model. That might be also the case. Yeah, like my model might be more updated, but that's good that the more updated model. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
moving in
Oh
a good,
wow.
because I think like there is, without a doubt, like at least in the United States, there is a metabolic health crisis with the presence of ultra processed foods and even environmental toxins. It's like it's not just calories in, calories out. Because like with like xenoestrogens or things that mimic our hormones and microplastics, like people just even just existing can cause like metabolic harm. So we really want to use a really good strong approach that's in line with our species specific evolution to try to help with this metabolic crisis. And I think AI could play a role in really spreading the word, amongst just like widely spreading,
Mm.
trying to help people, support people in the process.
Hearing this about the results you're getting from AI, it kind of it gives me a little bit of hope, because often people going to their doctor and with some kind of chronic disease, be it diabetes or whatever, they're just going to get a prescription, right? The doctor's under time pressure, and the doctor isn't going to talk about lifestyle and things like that. But if it gets to the point that AI is recognizing that keto, carnivore are
Yeah.
appropriate, and people start using it to understand what they should be doing with their health, it could help them to get off a lot of medications.
Yes. And AI could also help track like progress. Or even, if someone like I put what I ate and it gave me suggestions. And if people have more like advanced monitoring, like maybe monitoring ketones, or in the future, like currently there's those continuous glucose monitors. But if there's, one day like continue like insulin monitoring or something, just this could then help feedback like what would someone do to improve their approach. So yeah, these are, but at the same time, we also want to make it like accessible to the general public. Just simple things to start, simple advice to point them in a direction toward better metabolic health. This is kind of just the main thing now. Like what I realized, like the whole longevity field is actually targeting metabolic mechanisms, and that is the thing that is kind of making a lot of people like unnecessarily suffer.
Yeah. And, there's the recent change in government in the US. There's a lot more talk about this kind of healthy lifestyles and things. So you would hope that whatever happens government wise, you would hope that just the talk about it somewhat moves people on an individual level to think, wonder if this is healthy for me.
Yes. And even like the couple of great changes already, like swapping out seed oils for tallow. It's like that's fantastic. So yeah, it makes a difference, because yeah, these things such as seed oils will harm like the metabolic health. Interestingly, that new AI from China that I've been using, it's called DeepSeek. It came out recently. It is still telling me to eat plant based. So it's telling me that plant based is better for planetary health. You need it for the, polyphenols and like micronutrients, whereas my version of ChatGPT is telling me that plants contain chemicals that cause harm. Plants have toxins such as goitrogens, oxalates, all these things. They're not innocent; they cause harm, so which will impair metabolic health. So yeah, carnivore is the preferred way to go. And there's the
Wow,
other,
it's starting
yeah.
to sound like Anthony Chafee's been tinkering
I
behind the scenes at the source code or something.
I have been literally, yeah, I've been putting this on my Instagram as well, which is Carnivore Clair. Just like I've literally just been chatting to, and I was like, this is gold. This is gold. Like really good. Yeah, it's really great. And I think it's also important, like potentially like with some coaching. That's why, yeah, coaches such as yourself super valuable because it needs to work for the individual. Like if somebody, is not like me, I just went to eating meat and I'm like, this is great. But some people can't necessarily do that. So maybe, like something that allows them more flexibility, maybe a ketovore or something, monitoring blood markers and other health markers to see if that's still a good way. Because I think like no one should be left out, like whatever works for people's lifestyle to achieve better metabolic health. And I would also say another part of it, because like for example, in our company, we're trying to target autophagy, and specifically to really enhance like this is again for, of course, like we can enhance autophagy ourselves through diet and lifestyle, but for those with terminal illness, autophagy can also help, in a very targeted way to try to rid of things such as dementia. So yeah, that's
In the research that you've done for someone who's doing like a carnivore style diet or a keto diet where it's much easier to stop eating for a period of time, like what's the kind of optimal amount of time you've found to get into a good level of autophagy?
that would depend on the individual. But yeah, like I personally just started doing OMAD and one meal a day, and it really like helped with my mental clarity, which really helps with my job that is very demanding. But it would depend on the individual, and actually like some longer fast, like maybe a 48-hour fast like once in a while, if again depending on the individual, and if they have, if they're too like lean or something, maybe not. But the longer fast offers a different autophagy mechanism. This kind of geeky, but there's this chaperone mediated autophagy that's different, that only comes about with the longer fast, and it will be able to clear out a lot of the, it will be able to do even better at getting rid of the things, the toxic things that are not serving us well. Yeah.
And that's called, so chaperone mediated.
Yeah. So that, and that's also something that the longevity field is trying to target. How do we get to this next level of deep autophagy to really get rid of, clear out the junk, get rid of the mitochondria, because one of the key hallmarks of aging is just like dysfunctional mitochondria. So we want the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell, to be as good as possible. And this deep autophagy with not very frequently, but every so often a longer fast will help get to that state of really getting rid of the faulty material.
Mm, wow. So it's all very interesting, and it's so interesting that all of the stuff that we're now finding out about things like carnivore, like autophagy, fasting, it really kind of turns everything we've heard about nutrition on its head.
Yes.
From going from low fat and eat six small meals a day and all this kind of thing.
And I think it's kind of beautiful in a way. We're kind of getting closer, potentially. Maybe I'm biased, but I feel like we're getting closer to the truth. Because like the traditional guidelines are due to like a 7-day Adventist, like the funding that is, more plant-based focused, like saying having like eating meat will cause like desire and that's a sin, like things like that have nothing to do with our health. But
Yeah.
yeah, so and a lot of that, falling for like really good marketing, big food, big pharma want, having a cured, as Anthony Chafee says, having a cured patient is not a good business model. So, like, and this is we just kind of have to see these models for what they are, which is a way to make profit. And if they have more sick people, like they'll make more profits.
Yeah.
So,
I think, yeah, the cool thing about the truth of this that you mentioned, and like people changing their lifestyle, be it their diet or adding fasting or whatever it is they don't have to sit there and say, okay, show me studies that prove this works. You say, just try it, get
yeah.
feedback from your own body, and you'll know. Your body's going to tell you if it's the right thing you're doing.
Yes. And that makes the like communities and everything so helpful and like yeah, it's really nice. And I think the thing is however, to change the standard of care, like doctors probably want some sort of reports or studies and things like that. So I think it's still potentially helpful to try to just summarize whatever is the available data of the blood markers available now
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So if you were talking to a friend and a friend says to you, okay, Claire, you're doing really well on this diet. You work so efficiently. Everything's, very you just look so healthy. Um, I want to try carnivore for myself. How do I get started? What would you tell them?
So this has not really happened yet necessarily. I think one person maybe, but yeah, I would just eat meat until. So I think it's really important to eat meat until you're stuffed, and also to have enough fat. That's like one of my colleagues did try carnivore for a bit, but he lost a lot of weight really rapidly, and that was due to having lean proteins. So I'm like, no, 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 no. We need to have like approximately, if one could measure approximately like one to even like up to two, like 2 to 1, 1 to 1 or 2 to 1 fat to protein in grams. So I think it's really important to watch out for having enough fat, and then to just put in what you're eating to chat gpt and see what are the nutrient gaps. But and also, like, because I had a lot of healing to do in the beginning, I'm 5'1", but I ate a lot. I ate like up to 4 pounds of meat a day, fatty red meat a day, to heal all of the nutrient deficiencies and to get my period back. And then after a while, I just stopped being as hungry. And the other thing is, I did gain quite a bit of weight in the beginning, but I think that was healthy weight. It's like, yeah, just to get
So maybe when you were vegan, maybe you'd lost too much weight.
near the end for sure, because I was not tolerating anything. I was like, there's nothing I can eat right now. Like I couldn't eat vegetables, I couldn't eat nuts. I was like, what can I eat? Couldn't eat soy. So I was like,
Wow.
I couldn't eat fruits. Like everything was causing me IBS. So I was like, I literally can't eat anything right now. I'm like, yeah,
Right. And that's just that all cleared up, right?
yeah.
And so when you were eating those 4 pounds of meat every day, was that like because you were forcing yourself, or was it literally you were hungry for that amount of
I
meat?
was hungry. Yeah, I
Wow.
was literally hungry. Like for breakfast, I would eat a pound, and then I'm like, I probably want another half pound, and then it goes. So it just, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then I'm like, okay. And then over time, I just like my appetite kind of went down, and then I also found that I had more strength in the gym, so that was really nice. And I feel like I didn't do any like measurements or anything, but I feel like I've gained more muscle on carnivore. And I've also like my hair kind of came back. So like I was losing hair on vegan. So all these things are I'm happy with.
That's awesome. So, Claire, how can people get in touch with you online?
I'm at Carnivore Clair on Instagram, or my email is carnivoreclairlongevity at gmail.com. So
So,
yeah,
yeah, I'll put those in the show notes. Thanks
yeah,
very much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
I really appreciate this. And thank you for what you're doing.